So we're talking about is God in control, and if He is, how much control does He have? And I believe a lot of people have walked away from God because they don't believe that He's in control of anything. There's so many things that are happening around the world that we look at on a daily basis that discourage us as Christians because we can't understand if God is in control, the Almighty God, as He called Himself, then how can we have this, that, and the other? We're going to talk about some of those things today that we see around the world, even in your own personal life. There's things that has happened that has left you thinking, man, is God in control? What is God doing? Does He have power? Does He not have power? Is He who He say He is? Can He do this? Or and sometimes we look at it and we feel like we need to do something because we feel like He doesn't have control, that God is out of control. God's on vacation. Who knows? And so today I have Pastor David with me, and we're going to be talking about this subject. Feel free to ask questions. Those of you who are online and those of you who are in the sanctuary. So let's just talk about it. Is God in control? How have you, with this subject, in my own personal life, I have recognized throughout the course of my life that I felt like God wasn't in control many, many, many times, and that He didn't have control of the situation. Things that were happening with my children, things that were happening inside the church, things that were happening inside the world. I looked around, and there are different moments, not all moments, but there have been different times where I looked and said, man, God, I just don't think that you're in control of anything at this point. Even though I loved God, even though I believed in God, it was a struggle for me at times because so much was going on, and I couldn't believe that the God of the universe, that almighty power, could allow this type of stuff to go on. So let's just talk about that for a little while. If you have ever experienced that, and those of you out here listening, if that's been something that you have battled with throughout the course of your Christianity, is God in control of my life? Is He in control of my family? Is He in control of my finances? Is God there? It is. What type of control does He have?
I don't know any Christian that has not had that challenge or that has not thought that at some point in time in their life, to where they look at something and they're like, man, is God really in control of this? It's easy for us to go and to minister to people that do not believe in God, and talk to them when they're asking, how could God really be in control for this situation, because all this happens, and never actually consider ourselves. But I think every one of us at some point in time in our walk has to answer that question, is God really in control of it? To be able to have the faith to keep moving forward or to operate in the situations. So in my life, there's been specific times where I've struggled and I've wondered, and you walk through it to come to the conclusion that you have. So.
Absolutely. And so I guess the conclusions that we draw is, does God have all control? Does He have some control, or does He have no control? Does God control some things, and some things are left for us to control, or does He control all things, or is there nothing that He has control over, and we just kind of just hastening through life and just kind of figuring things out as we go forward? And so with that being said, let's just talk about some of the things that has been going on in the world that has left us spellbound as we looked at things and we wondered, God, where are you? And I'm not the only one that ever thought, God, where are you? We looked at Hurricane Katrina, where an entire city was underwater, and people who believe God, churches in New Orleans, and people around the world were looking and wondering, God, what's going on here? God, are you in control or not? The entire city's underwater. People have lost their homes. Churches went under, they were flooded. People were just confused at what God could be thinking of doing and allowing something like this to happen. With Hurricane Katrina, we have Hurricane Andrew, 9/11. 9/11 is another example of where people looked at. You do have something you want to share there?
At the same time, then you can look at the smaller angle and not just look at the big ones, and look at the smaller things and say, man, God, are you really in control when you find your spouse cheating, or you found that your young daughter is now pregnant, or you find that all this crazy stuff happens that you looked at and say, wait a minute, I lived a righteous life. I followed what you said. I obeyed you, God. I trusted you. I raised my children right. I did all this, and yet at the same time, things are happening that is not according to the blessing that God promises, but it seems like the exact opposite. And then just as much as you're asking about, Hurricane Katrina and all these other bigger things that happen, you're still at a crisis where you're looking at your own life and wondering, man, what happened here? Is
That's
God really in control?
That's exactly right. And that's one of the things I want to hit on as we go further. It's just that not only do we see these bigger, large-scale things, but we have some smaller things that we can look at in our own personal lives that just doesn't make sense. And I think being able to answer the question why at times, not really being able to maybe fix what's going on, but just being able to understand what's going on. If God is in control, will help us to navigate through some of that. But you're absolutely right. A lot of our personal lives, we can look down to my own personal life, like you said. You look at it, a lot of people are looking at their families where their child was, got pregnant, or the child was raped or molested, or something happened to you in your personal life. You look and say, man, God, where were you at? Why all this was going on? I mean, really, you let somebody do this or that or the other. And so that's why we want to talk about this, because we need to make sense out of what happens.
That's right.
So let's just go down into Psalms 24. That's where we're going to start our study today, Psalms 24. And that's going to be the beginning of finding out, is God in control? And if he is, how much control does he have? So let's read Psalms 24. And I'm going to go to it on my phone because it's going to allow me to navigate better. And so Psalms 24, I'll give you a chance to turn to it if you got it. Get a Bible, turn to it so you can follow along and read with us so you're not just hearing us. Psalms 24 verse 1 simply says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. And so I think that's a very, very important scripture to begin the conversation to find out, is God in control? God begins to declare that there are 3 territorial areas that he has taken rights over. He's taken rights over these areas. One of them is the earth. God says the earth is the Lord's. So we know that the earth belongs to God. And the fullness thereof. That means everything in the earth belongs to God. And those that dwell therein. So that means everybody in the world that is living here on planet Earth belongs to God. And I think that's huge to know that God has taken rights, or God is drawing the line and saying, look, I know you're wondering, how much control do I have? So let me show you where I'm at in the process. Let me show you what I have jurisdiction over. Let me show you, this process. He said the earth. He talks about the fullness of everything in the earth, and he talks about us. Now, let's just talk about that a little while, because we have people who are not believers of God.
That's right.
We have people who are into witchcraft and warlocks, and we have all types of demonic things going on in the world, and God is saying that even those people belong to him, that he has some type of leverage in the process, and we're going to talk about how much he has. But just thinking about that statement that the earth belongs to God, everything in the earth belongs to God, and those that dwell in it, including me and you.
That's right.
Isn't that a powerful statement?
That's right.
So with that being said, let's just look a little bit further. I don't know if you have anything that you want to share in regards to that, but we can continue to dig into this.
Well, I mean, you know that even the unrighteous still belong to God, because he says that in one hand he keeps the righteous, and in the unrighteous in the other hand. I mean, but both of them are in the hands of God.
Wow.
Both of them are
Wow.
before him. Both of them are watching. He's paying attention. He's watching. He's got everything in the picture.
Well, that's very, very important to understand. I think a lot of people struggle with that. They don't see the unrighteous being in the hands of God. They don't see God being a part of their lives at all. And so we see the Saddam Husseins, we see the drug lords, and we see all these people doing all these horrendous things, and we think they have to be the devil's people. And God has his people, the devil has his people, and so there is this dividing line that God is drawing, but God says everybody belongs to him.
To the point to where, I mean, people look at God and they say, okay, you're our Father if we serve you, if we look for you, if we do all this. And yet the reality of it is God is the Father regardless of anybody. That is his position. There is no other God other than him. There is no other God outside of him. And so when God decided that he was going to come here and make mankind, he stood as the Father of all of mankind, irregardless.
My goodness.
And it is hard. I think that, and I think that you're going to go forward onto this, but I know it is difficult for people to encounter that or believe that, because they don't understand where then does unrighteousness fit in the picture.
That's right.
If God is the Father of the righteous, then it makes sense, and they can say, okay, we can follow this. But if God is the God of those who are unrighteous as well, or those who don't believe in it, or those who go over here, if God is God of everybody, and he has control of everything, and he's in the picture with that, you're left with the gap of wondering why did you choose this? Why did you choose that?
Absolutely, because I think that we look at God as the way we go through life, dealing with our fathers and our experiences, and we assume that God has the same mentality that we do, And so, since our father wasn't in our lives, I'm just saying, maybe our father wasn't in our lives, or maybe we wasn't, at some degree wasn't in the lives of someone else. We tend to see this over and over again being modeled in society, and so we tend to choose it and look at God as in that light, as if, God, there's a God that loves the good, and then for the bad, he just kind of casts them away. And in this, when you look at this life, you have the God the Father who, looks at the good and then casts away the others, and then you look at in this life where you have good fathers who take care of their children, and then you have the bad fathers who look and say, well, I'm just going to move on from you. Or we see bad kids where the father just moves on from them. And so we just kind of look at that and we say, man, God must be the same way, where if you're good, he's with you. If you're bad, he's not with you. He just kind of moves you on. And so, yeah.
Well, as well as that, take it and look at it, you switch it around a little bit, and they look at being a son or a daughter in the same way. If I'm a good or bad son, that's going to depend on whether you're my father or not. If I'm a good son, then in that case, you're going to be my father. You're going to look at me. You're going to do right. But if I'm a bad son, then you're not going to be my father, and you're going to move on from that. And they have that mindset with God. So when they look at everybody else that is not being a good son, or not a good daughter, or not following orders,
That's right.
They look at God and say, oh God, you must not be their father. You must not be this, because they're over here believing this, or they're over here doing this, or they're all here over here. But when God says that he is the Alpha and the Omega, and when he begins to describe who he is, he describes who he is based off of himself, not based off of who we are. And so when he says that I am a father, and he describes that, he's basing it off of who he is, not based off of who you are, or who your neighbor is, or who your friend is, or who this person is, or who all this with it all. Because he doesn't change according to all that. He has decided who he is, and he has come as a father from that angle. And so he says, that's who I am.
That's right. And so let's just look at this for a moment, because God is saying everything belongs to him. These three areas belong to him. Now, anything that belongs to you, you have control over. That's the one thing we need to understand. So anything that belongs to you, you have control over. That's why we can if we have a car, we can change its color if we want to. Right. We can park it wherever we want to. Because that car belongs to us. We can park on the street, we can park on the road, and our clothes belong to us. That's why we can wear what we want to wear. I didn't have to wear this shirt today. That shirt belongs to you. That vest belongs to you. So you can wear that whenever you want to.
Right.
Why? Because you control that. You control that. And so I think that that's the one area we need to begin to look at, is that whatever belongs to God that he mentions in Psalms 24, he has control over. So what does God have control over? And if he does, what control does he have? He has control over three areas that he talks about: the entire earth, everything in the earth, and those that dwell therein. So we know that God controls three areas. Now, there's going to be a discrepancy as we go forward. If God is in control of all three areas, then why?
Why did he do it? Or why is he allowing this?
Here we go. This is a hot topic. Why?
Right.
If he is declaring that he is the God that is in control of all these areas, then why?
That's right.
Now, all of us ask the question why. Jesus himself, in the Garden of Gethsemane, looked at the Father as he was praying and said, why? Why are you forsaking me? He asked the question why,
right.
because why is the point of understanding. If you can understand, then you can flow with God.
Right.
But now why is the question.
Right. Yep. And I think what you're saying, where if you can understand, you can flow with God, that is the key element to the whole picture. Because every single thing that happens in your life has a reason. And
Absolutely.
if you can understand why God allowed it, or what is in the picture with it, then you can align yourself according to his will, and you can follow, and there is a point and a purpose to it. But as long as you don't believe that God is in control of it, or you don't understand how God is in control of it, and you think that God's not in the picture or anything else, then you don't ask the question why. You think this is the enemy, or you think this is you, or you think this is a failure, or you think this is something else. But if you can ask the why, I think that your ability to live the blessed life that God put in picture
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of a fallen world is purely based on your ability to understand the question why. And so I think that is huge in the picture.
And man, that is so profound, because man, growing up in the church, in churches, as I was growing up as a young man, we were taught that we didn't ask why. It was the word of God is the word of God, and that's it. You don't go by questioning God and go back and saying why this, why that. If you were told something, the word of God said this, you just did it. But Jesus, when he asked the question why, he showed us that it's important that we understand why things are happening, so that we don't give up on God, so we don't assume that he's not in control, so we don't get caught in all these little pockets that church folks get caught in, and eventually they give up on God, they walk away because they say, man, how could God do all this? If he was here, how could he allow these abortion clinics? How could he allow all this stuff going on? What kind of God would do that?
And what you're saying is so important and so profound, because Christian culture that says, that looks at it and says, you shouldn't be asking why everything else, is basing that off of when you look at the saints in the Bible, when you look at Jesus' life before that point in time. You don't see them asking questions like, why am I about to be crucified? Why is this going to happen? Why is this going to happen? But the reality of it is that's because you're only looking at it from the angle of what's being presented, and you don't know the behind the stories. Everybody that walks through this stage or is able to get to that level of ministry or understand something has asked the question why on the back and answered the question why, and that's given them the strength to get where they went to. And so that view of Christianity that says, you should just believe and you should never ask why, you should never, look, if God wanted you to know, he would tell you, or and if he hasn't brought it up, then you shouldn't be asking any questions. Anything like that is based off of the fallacy of not realizing that all these saints, all these Christians, all these mighty men of God, everybody else asked the question in the background. At some point in time, I believe at some point in time, Jesus, even before he came to the cross, Jesus was asking God at the mountaintop when he was alone, when you don't see anything, when nothing's recorded, and he was asking Jesus, Lord, why did my father die when I was a young boy? Mm-hmm. Why are the Pharisees coming after me? Why did this have to happen? Why am I going to have to do this? And he, he had to do this because he had an answer to it.
That's right.
Because then when the Pharisees did come, or when he did say, hey, I have to go to the cross, he gave the answer to his disciples. Mm-hmm. He already had answered the question. And because he had already answered the question, he was in a position to be successful in what God called him to do. That why is huge. And making sure that you don't just look at it and fall with that culture, making sure you recognize what you're walking through, is crucial. It's
sure. And I think that when you ask the question why, it allows you to see God in the situation. Until you ask the question why, you can't see God in what he's doing, because it hasn't been revealed to you yet. It hasn't been revealed to you yet.
That's right.
And so many people who don't ask the question why and don't allow God to share with them what he is doing is stuck to look out as the world looks. And the Bible, I think Ephesians 2 talks about we are flowing with the course of this world. Ephesians 2:1, and we don't want to flow with the course of this world. Right. We don't want to be going in that in that way. We want to be able to get on the back end and see that.
That's right.
Go ahead. You
and haven't we talked about this? Matthew talks about the seed, the farmer sowing the seeds, and when he goes forward to explain the parable, he says that any time that the word of God comes, but the person who receives it doesn't understand it, then the enemy comes up and snatches it, and that corresponds to the importance of asking the question why, because God is sowing things in our life. Everything that's happening, if God is in control, it's all sowing things in our life. But if we don't understand why, the enemy is able to snatch the benefit and the purpose and the advantage out of the situation. And so it's not that it's bad because the enemy's in the picture, or it's bad because it was designed bad. It only becomes bad when we don't ask the question why, when we don't look farther, because then the enemy can snatch the answer away. And when you don't have the answer, now it actually becomes bad.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It was never designed to be, but
absolutely right. No, you're absolutely, he's on the hot track. Absolutely right, because it becomes bad because now you don't have the understanding that you need to see things correctly. That's why you have to have men of God in your life. That's why you got to have, if you can't if you can ask the question why and you can't hear it, then you need to have somebody around you that can hear it,
That's
so
right.
they can help make sense out of what's going on. Because we see 9/11, we don't understand that. Well, we ask why. If we can't hear it, then we're stuck to listen to CNN, Fox News. I mean, and everybody else's thoughts. I mean, and then you got your astronauts and atheists, all these people who are throwing their thoughts in there. Before long, you have about 1,000 thoughts, and you don't really know where to go with it, even though you're a believer. Because believing in God is one thing, but trusting in God is another.
That's right.
And I just think that, that question why is very, very important. And all of us had to ask that question.
That's right.
I mean, I was asking that question just yesterday. There was something that was going on, and I don't mind asking why. Doesn't mean I don't believe in God. Just means I didn't understand God.
That's right.
Some people believe that. They believe that if you ask why, that means that you don't trust God.
That's right.
If you did, you wouldn't be asking why. But why is not it's not a basis of trust or distrust. It just means that you just need to understand a little bit more, because His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts.
That's right.
And so we have to do that. So let's look at the why, because if we can understand the why, then we can make the leap with this God in all that He's doing in this world, as well as in our own personal lives.
That's right.
Ephesians 1:11 will be our journey to begin to answer the question why. Why does God allow certain things? Is He in control, and at what level is He in control? And let's look at Ephesians 1:11.
All right.
Ephesians 1:11. Let me just get down in here. It says, "In Him we were all also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will and counsel." He works out everything in conformity according to His purpose. That's right. In His will and His counsel. And so God is saying that there's a counsel that's been set up. There's a will and a purpose that's been laid out there. He's working out everything according to that. And so what He's saying is, what we need to start looking at is God in control? Okay, yes. There are some things that are happening there, but God said the things that are happening, what you need to understand is, I'm working them out. I'm allowing them to play out. Now, I know you don't see me as a God that would allow a city to go underwater, because we see God as a healer, a deliverer. We don't see Him as allowing something. But God said all of this that you see happening is working out according to the counsel and purpose of my will. God's will is at play.
That's right.
And so, and just looking at your own personal life, when God says this, how does that minister to you when you hear that? That God is saying, I'm working out everything according to the counsel of my purpose, will, and my counsel. All this is happening, based on something that I have ordained. I have pretty much ordained to happen.
That's right.
How do you, when you begin to think about your own personal life, how does that scripture minister to you in regards to that?
How does it minister to me?
Yeah, when you start thinking about your personal life, as in God allowing things to happen according to His will and His counsel and His purpose, as you begin to think about all the things that have happened to you, or happened to your spouse, or happened to your children, or happened to you in church, or happened to you on the job. I mean, there has been multitudes of things that we can look at and say, this ain't God. God would not allow this. And so we rebuke things that we should be receiving.
That's right.
So when we think about our own personal lives, when you think about this, I mean, how does this scripture minister to you in regards to things that you probably looked at in your life and said, this isn't God. God's not in control of this. Something's wrong here.
I would say two things. Part of me receives the scripture and gets encouraged because you know how tailored your life is. You can begin to look at the certain things that have happened, and you can begin to say, man, okay, if I stand here and believe this scripture in the picture, then in that case, I know that, when my parents got divorced when I was, 12, 14, that, it was all part of God's will. Everything that happened beyond that was all part of God's long-standing will to get me up here. And it was. And after years and years and years of seeing it, you come to an understanding of the reasons why God did things and how it positioned you to find your spouse, how it positioned you to come into your calling, how it positioned you to do all these things. Yes. And if you had remained in that family environment, you would not have become who you are today. So from that angle, it's there. From the other side of the picture, it becomes it's difficult because because it's almost like you're being asked to have blind faith again. Blind faith to the point to where you're saying, okay, I know that God is saying that all things work for the good, but without knowing how it works for the good, and sometimes you don't know right off the bat with it, it's still very, very difficult. it's still one of those scriptures that most people will probably move over immediately, only because it's not something you can immediately apply to yourself. Like you can say, oh, you know, here's the answer to this in this situation. Bam, I need to do A, B, and C. Yep. Instead, it's something that you need to work on your mindset, and your mindset needs to transition to where you begin to look at it and say, wait a minute, whether I go high or whether I go low, whether something happens over here, something happens over here, no matter what it is, I need to work on my mindset to recognize and align myself knowing that, man, God is still in control. And if God is in control, I already know his plans. And if I know his plans, I know he's in control, then I know that this thing is working for my benefit to some extent, somehow, some way.
My goodness, and he talked about the mind. And how critical is that? The scripture, what God is trying to get us to see is that, our mindset. He's trying to get us to see the bigger picture.
That's right.
You know, he's saying, this isn't about whether God's in control or not, because we already know that God is in control based on Psalm 24. He said, this is about the bigger picture of understanding that I work everything out according to my counsel, will, and purpose. He said, you need to see the bigger picture. You're seeing the small picture of wow, the whole city is underwater. And I'm not minimizing the fact that the city was underwater, but God doesn't see a city underwater. God sees something different according to his purpose, his counsel, will. What he is seeing is not what we are seeing. He's trying to tell us that everything is working according to what he sees and not what we see. You know, go ahead.
And don't you think that that you have to be able to look at that verse and apply that to your mind, and you have to be able to allow that to influence your perspective.
Absolutely.
First, before you can actually get more specific details.
My goodness.
Because you can't, I mean, that is the beginning of understanding that God is in control with it. Because you're not going to be able to, I mean, if you can't see that if you're not looking for, okay, this is for my benefit, this is for, you know, this is for God's plan and his purpose and everything else like this, then you're going to be looking or receiving every thousand thing that the enemy is trying to bring to your attention. And all his agents in the world and everything else is bringing to you. That's right.
And so what we are fighting is the will of God. And so when we look out and we begin to make comments, and when we begin to say things that we don't have, see, Job had this problem. You know, Job had this problem. Job had this problem where he was looking at things on the outside that was happening to him and his family, his cattle, his children, you know, his wife, of course, was giving him issues there at one point, you know. But Job had this problem where he began to look at things and try to size them up, not according to the counsel and will, and the purpose of God. He tried to size them up based on his own understanding and his own, what intellect and what the conclusions that he drew.
Integrity.
And it messed him up all the way 42 chapters. It took 42 chapters before he finally looked and said, I've uttered things too wonderful for me.
That's right.
I've uttered something that I have no clue what I'm talking about. And how many times has that been us? We looked at something way down the road and what? Oh my goodness, Lord, what in the world was I thinking? You were way past where I was at.
Yeah. And so in the process of being able to answer the question why, I mean, you have to get to that point in time to where you recognize that the God you serve is bigger and more wondrous, and his knowledge and his plans and his will, is the way he formulates thoughts and everything else with this is too wonderful for us to fully understand. And that has to be the basis and the approach with it, or else you're going to continue to wonder, you're going to continue to look at it and try to base it off of yourself. I mean,
my goodness. And so that is true. And so what we are doing as a nation and as a country and as a people, we're fighting God.
That's right.
And I must understand that when you begin to fight God, I mean, first of all, I don't know how you can do that, and still receive, but as you begin to fight God and resist him because you think that, he has failed you, or how could you let this happen over here? Family, we've been praying and believing, oh my goodness, we begin to fight God. And so what you really do is hinder the process of what he's trying to do through you or for you by blaming him. We start blaming God rather than getting the understanding of why, so we can walk with God and see God in the process. We start blaming him and resisting him. The very God that's trying to bring something to us, and God would never take from us. He's trying to bless us, amen? He's trying to bless us. And so he would never, there are times in the Bible where God would remove something for a season, but God is not a taker, he's a giver.
That's right.
He's a blesser. He loves to bless us. So God's not interested in cursing you. He's interested in blessing you. That's what the Bible said. I know.
That's right.
You know, and so we miss out on the beauty of what He's doing.
That's right.
Because when you get back out, I mean, many of us have got back out of our lives and looked at something and said, "You are a bad man, God." Because God has been able to do something that no way we would have been able to bring it together.
He just lines it all
up. Oh my goodness,
That's
family! You haven't talked to family for years. You know, it's been this dividing wall where, you know, I didn't like this and I hate this and you don't do this. And all of a sudden, God will allow something to happen that looks absolutely crazy. And you're like, what in the world's going on? Only because in the purpose and counsel of His will, when it's all said and done, family will come together through it.
That's right.
This is why we don't understand cancer and sickness and disease.
That's right.
And all of the things that God has allowed. We say, God, where are you? I'm praying for mama, but she's about to die of cancer, and she died of cancer.
Yeah.
And then we say, God, you can't be in control, I'm done. But you don't understand that God is the God of purpose and will and His counsel. And so you cannot violate that. That's going to be played out. But God knows through one man dying, an entire nation and even the world came to know God through Jesus dying. And so God knows if that's true in that sense, then how can we not see the bigger picture that God understood that even through cancer, something like this, that God, where are you? Are you in control? Sure I am. But even through cancer of allowing grandmama to die or allowing mama to die of cancer, He knows that through that death, multitudes are going to be coming in, and God is going to use that. Even as sad as it is, God is going to use her as a catalyst to bring about a bigger picture, a greater good.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is I mean you could look at the verse where the Bible is talking about no eye has seen nor has entered into the hearts of man or the imagination or the ears or anything else what God has stored up for those who love Him. I mean, and what you're hearing from that is that God's His purposes flow from a spiritual angle where you can't see it, where you're unable to actually watch it. And so because, and all throughout the Bible, God is trying to get us to recognize this. All throughout the Bible, God is trying to get us to walk, not by our sight, not by how we hear, but by faith. All throughout the Bible. And the reason He say that through faith is because He knows that through natural means you can't watch the purposes of God. You can't see them. You can't see the strands connect. All you're able to see is, you know, maybe a situation here, and then a situation here, and then a situation here, and a situation here. But you don't understand how there's thousands of different weaving things moving all together to make a grand plan come to be. All that is in the other realm. The realm you can't see, you can't hear, everything else. This is what God is literally saying when He says it's not entered into your hearts, you know, you can't see it, you haven't heard it, you haven't done all this.
Yes.
Because He wants us to realize something is happening behind the scenes. What you see is not what is happening. What you see is only what your natural eyes can catch in the picture. And as long as you operate off of your natural eyes, then you're bound to only see the things that naturally are happening because you force your life into these lines. Versus being able to actually trust in God and let God do this incredible thing in the back picture. I remember, for an example, my wife and I lost a child. We had a miscarriage. It was in the earlier stages, so it wasn't as devastating as people who have it on the later stages. But this was very devastating to us. And I asked the questions why. I asked the same questions with it. Later though, it wasn't until later that I actually began to see that both my wife and I began to see two different things happen because of it. Number one, we realized that we had a cruise planned before we knew we were pregnant. And this cruise, actually with the dates and everything was set. Now when we got pregnant, we decided to cancel the cruise and we decided not to go on it, okay? And then the child came and everything else and then we lost it and we wondered why. Well, we found out that during the time of the actual cruise that we were supposed to be on there, that was when the hurricane hit Florida. Our cruise ship would have been in the middle of the hurricane. Now, I'm not saying that was the only purpose of the child dying was because, you know, God didn't want us to go on the cruise ship. But what I am saying is I was able to see certain things. We were both able to see, wait a minute, there was a role that this played to be able to protect us. And then, at another point in time, we began to talk to somebody in church that had lost 3 children. And the only way that we had, the only way that we were able to, you know, empathize and connect and recognize and be able to minister to this person was because we had felt that pain. We had walked that area. Now, all these things, God was connecting different dots. But when it happened, we didn't know that.
That's right.
We didn't know that down the road, God was going to bring us to different people that had the same issue, that had struggled and that were struggling with us, that our neighbors had come in and they had lost multiple children. All these different things. We didn't know that God was actually walking towards us to get to this, and he knew he was going to have to take us through something that would hurt very much to be able to give us the understanding in the spirit to be able to minister to that. But it was there, and he knew it. He knew it all in the background.
My goodness. Hey, and that's why you cannot stay stuck in your experiences of what you have experienced and make that the catalyst by which you see things, nor can you get stuck into what you have been taught by others and make that the catalyst, because that's what happens. Our experiences and what we've been taught and heard all throughout our lives become the catalyst in which we see God. But because Pastor David has looked at this and he has transformed his mind and renewed it to the things of God, he was able to see God in the situation, which allowed him. Now, it didn't take away the pain.
No.
Of the baby, but it did give you clarification and understanding so that you can see God in it, so that you could be more accepting of what happened and work through it, rather than say, God, what's wrong with you? What kind of God would do right?
Actually, to be completely honest, it turned something horrible into a blessing.
My Lord.
And the only way you can say that, and I'm not saying that to lessen the pain or anything else with this, but my wife and I have looked at this and we've seen the blessing in the picture with it. And that, just seeing God take something that was so horrible and turn it into a blessing, has changed our mindset and what he can do and our ability to trust him regardless of anything we ask. Because we know if he can do that to that, he can do it to anything else. And we were able to actually see the verse play out that literally says, you know, that all things are working for your good.
That's right. So the two things that I want to make sure we stay on, and it's so good. The two things we need to look at here to make sure that to answer the question why is, number one, God's purpose and will, which we discussed in Ephesians 1:11, and the second thing to answer the question why is found in James 1:12 through verses James 1:12 through 14. I'm going to read that to you. Thank God for cell phones. It makes it easier for me here. So James 1:12, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. For once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Verse 13 is very, very important. And you know, look, he's smiling because he already knows where we're going, because this is the other aspect that we want to ignore. And this is the part that drives me crazy, because I don't understand why we want to ignore it when we are part of it. 13, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But here's 14, where we want to be at. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own evil desires. So, so we got God's purpose and will, and the second thing we need to look at to answer the question why is God's free will. God's free will, because we want to answer the question why stuff is happening. Why does God, I can't believe you both be in control. You know, you both, why you letting this happen? But I don't understand why we feel like God should fix our mess. Why do we feel like, okay, God has given us free will to do whatever we want. But if we do whatever we want, then we want him to be in control of what we just did, to fix what we just did. Otherwise, he's not the God of the universe. He can't be almighty, because I just robbed the bank, but yeah, I'm getting ready to go to jail. God, you're going to get me out, right? God doesn't get you out. You have to do 15 years in jail. You say, well, God isn't in control because, man, I went to court. I prayed. I fasted. My mama was praying. And the judge still said, I'm going, well, I'm trying to see, this is the loophole. These are the little pockets that we need to understand, because we feel like God has no power because he did not answer us, because we did something according to free will that he did not fix. And this is where we have a problem with God, because we think that we're God's God.
That's right.
We think that we can tell God when, how, where, and what to do. And if he doesn't do it, then he's not in control of anything. He ceased to be God at that point, because he didn't do what we wanted.
Yeah. And in reality, it's a play on the enemy. It's a tactic on the enemy to do both things. It's a tactic of the enemy to tell you to look at everything bad in the earth and say, oh, God's not in control. Don't have faith in him. and then to switch it, and the same God that you're saying is not in control, then the enemy comes back and says, oh, God should be in control of whether you should get out of jail or not. I mean, it's a tactic of the enemy to switch the whole thing and to play off both sides on God and try to use him against himself. I mean, and if God doesn't do it, then you don't believe him. And then if God doesn't do it, then you want him to do here. I mean, man, it's a play back and forth. But the benefit of these meetings and these things with it and how we're talking about it is because we want to talk about, these plays, these real questions that people have, and how we really look at the situations. We're not interested in coming up here and talking about some deep philosophical things.
That's right.
That will be how to apply. We want to talk about the things that when your son does go to jail and you've been praying and asking God, why you must, all these things, that you don't go back and look at it and say, God, you failed my son. You were supposed to get him out. Wait a minute. See, there is a personal responsibility. There is certain things that God has put in play since the beginning of time. Actually, I think we were discussing it once before, that God has given us the ability to have a blessing in the air and a curse in the air. And we can choose which one of these we pull on.
Sure.
If we walk in faith and we listen to instructions and we go forward with this, then we're able to pull on that blessing.
Yes, yes.
If we decide not to, and we decide to go against his instructions and everything else, because his instructions are not in line to corner us or anything else. His instructions are in line to give us the answers that we need to have to be able to live the blessed life, and to tell us how to avoid the cursed life. But if we decide not to listen to those, then we are reaching for the curse with it. I mean, and that is in the picture.
It's so funny. Oh my goodness. He was talking about being the blessing, but it's so funny when you were saying that. I started thinking about it. I said, we want God to stop everything in the world, but we want God to stop us. It's ironic to me that, so we want God to stop, be in control of the Hurricane Katrina, be in control of the plane flying into the building. We want to stop that, God, stop that. We want God to stop all this, but when it comes to our being drawn away by our own evil desires and time, we don't want God to stop us from what we want to do, because we want to do it. So if we want it both ways. We want God to stop something over here, but not stop us in what we're doing. And I don't understand how we can see it in one light, but not see it in this light over here.
And at the same time, when you hear different pastors or everybody else say, this is what God says, don't do this, don't do this, then you turn around and say, oh, you're controlling God. Or, oh man, you're telling me all this, you're trying to be, more, or we look at these people, everything else like this, we don't want anybody to tell us what to do.
Right.
But then, when the consequences come to the picture, then we're looking at it and saying, hey, come get us out.
We don't want God to stop us. Right. We don't want God to stop us if we want to go do something. Like right now. Just say, for instance, it's Sunday, football's on, I want to watch some football, see a few touchdowns. And so, I'm going to decide that I want to go to the Indianapolis coast and go to the stadium on Sunday morning, when I know that God has called me to be in the house of God.
Right.
I want to take off and go. Now, I don't want God to stop me to get in that car heading down to go see Andrew Luck and then play football. Hold on, don't stop me there, God. I got to get down there. Now, if we want God to be in control, then we can't have him controlling the tsunami or controlling the New Orleans and not controlling the fact that we can't get in our car. See, but we want that control to be in ours. We want to control ourselves. But we want to pick and choose what he controls.
That's right.
Either he is in control or he's not. You cannot divide what type of control God got. You can't be God's God. That's why we have to look at this thing. That's why we have this discussion, because we want to paint a picture. We want to draw some conclusions that you can begin to look at your own life and see, am I doing this? Am I looking at this wrong? Am I seeing it this way? Because I know that people are seeing it this way. Because we do whatever we want. And if we really wanted God to be in control, then all the stuff that we be doing, almost 3/4 of, maybe almost all of it, we wouldn't do. Because God was like, oh, you want to date her? No, you can't date her. Oh, you want to go over here and buy this house? No, you can't buy the house. No, you want to, no, you want to wear that vest? Nope, can't wear that, can't wear it. I mean,
yep. And the interesting thing is God has offered his control to the blessing. If you follow the instructions he's given, then the results will be controlled. God has said, if you do, the things that I instruct you, if you follow A, B, C, and D with this, or when I'm talking to you, then, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a long life here. You're going to do it. It's kind of like the verse where it talks about, honor your mother and father, for this is the first commandment with the promise that you have long life. So he says, if you honor your mother and father, you're going to have a long life with it. But on the flip side then, so you have the choice to allow God to have control. God will have control over your long life, when you die, everything else, if you follow his instructions.
That's right.
But we don't want to give him that initial control. We want to keep that control in our hands. We want to decide. If we are frustrated with our parents, we want to be able to speak back to them. We want to be able to correct them. We want to judge them as if we know. We want to go back and say, look, you did me wrong here. I don't need to treat you right here. All this stuff like this. We want to go back to that. But then we still want God to control the outcome. We still want God to control both of them. And I think what you're saying is fascinating.
That's right.
Because you can't pick it both ways.
You can't.
If you want God to have control over the outcome and everything else to happen, if you want God to control whether you're going to go to jail, everything else with this, and realize it may be in God's plan for you to go to jail.
Woo.
Let's talk about Paul. Let's talk about Peter. All these different people, there are different people that it was in God's plan for them to go to jail.
Absolutely.
But if you want it to be in God's plan and what your life happens, everything else, then follow his instructions and let him have control over this angle over your life too, and submit yourself to him. But if you want to have control over your own life and decide, when am I going to wake up? Where am I going to go here? I want to go play around with these people even though I know that God has instructed not to. I want to go do what I want to do over here. Then in that case, you have taken on the responsibility for the result of those actions. And God has no longer said, look, this is in your hands.
You have taken on the responsibility to be your own God.
That's right.
And to order your own steps and to put yourself wherever you think you need to be at, which is a very dangerous thing, because many of us know that we put ourselves in places that we know, oh God, I shouldn't have been here, or with people, or I shouldn't have been with you, or we have shared information with somebody that, oh, that came back to bite us, that was sharp. So, looking at those areas and understanding this, we have to be able to see God in its totality, be able to see him as a balanced God and see that from our own perspective. I'm glad that I get to choose what I want to wear. I'm glad that I'm glad that he doesn't. He's a Lord to me, not a Lord over me. He's not a dictator. He's not. He doesn't dictate. God allows me the opportunity to brush my teeth whenever I want, to dress myself how I want, to read as much of the Word of God as I want, to turn the TV if I want. I love that freedom. Now, responsibility, but I love the fact that he allows me to function.
And to just make sure, following what you're saying, make sure we're in balance with it all. Because, man, his freedom that he brings in is incredible. And Jesus actually literally says, take my yoke upon me, it's easy to bear. Because God's freedom, on the flip side, God is not controlling from an angle of all this. And one of the ways to recognize that is we realized long ago that if we wanted to go do something, and if it was within the will of God, if we wanted to go, blow up a building, that's completely, whoever does that, that's outside of the will of God, that's outside of, his instructions, everything else like this. But if you wanted to go do something like, hey, I think I'm going to go preach over here, or I think I'm going to go over here to this place with it. Then God says, okay, the blessing will follow you. You tell me what you want to do, and I'm going to back and support you, and I'm going to help and bless it with it. And so God has such a relationship with it that he's saying, if you're submitted under me, then when you go over here, would you like to do this, or would you like to do this? Then he looks at it and he listens to us, and he says, man, whatever you want to do, I'm going to help support you. I'm going to make that, the blessing's going to follow you.
Sure. So let's look at this, because I think now we need, everything has to be proved out. There's always got to be some proofs to what we say. If God is in control, which I'm a firm believer that he is in control of everything that is happening.
That's right.
Absolutely everything, including me. And so if that's true, it doesn't take away from God's purpose and will or God's free will, because God works with the things that we do. But let's look at Proverbs 21:1. We're going to start there and start looking at some things, and then we're going to dive into 1 Samuel, because then we're going to see that being played out. Proverbs 21:1 says, in the Lord's hand the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels towards all who please him. Let's read this. Let's read it in the New Living Translation. The king's heart is like a stream of water directed by the Lord. He guides it wherever he pleases.
Could you tell me what the
Proverbs 21:1? Yes, actually, thanks for asking that. Yeah, Proverbs 21:1. And so it talks about the heart of the king is in the hands of God. And it's like a river. He turns it wherever he wants it to go. And God again is declaring that I am a controller of the heart. Whatever I want to happen in your heart, I control the heart. Now you may control your actions. You might be able to get up and brush your teeth, dress yourself, feed yourself, drive wherever you want. But you don't control your heart because God says the heart of the king is in my hands. And it, like the stream of water, the stream just runs, its path. He said, I control it and put it wherever I want it to go. And how important is that? When we start thinking about a God that says, I'm in control of your heart, and so I want you to know that you might be doing some things, but I want you to know that I'm in control of your heart. And so that it's so profound to me because I think I used the illustration one time where, and how to determine this is that sometimes you might want to go to Burger King. Maybe you might want to go to Burger King. So I'm saying, I'm going to Burger King. And God's not going to stop me from getting in the car and driving to Burger King. I'm on my way to Burger King. But since God doesn't control my actions, I have free will, he controls my heart. So he says, well, while he's on the way to Burger King, there's a divine appointment at Taco Bell. Even though both of those places are horrible to go, by the way. Even though I still go there, praise God. And so at times, I still got a few catches. But God said there's a divine appointment at Taco Bell. So while you're on your way to Burger King, though I didn't stop your free will, since I control your heart, let me just change it and change the heart of the king so that you will go. I won't stop the car from being driven. I didn't change you, but I'm going to change your heart on the matter so that instead of going to Burger King, you're going to go to Taco Bell because there's a divine appointment there that I need you to meet so-and-so that's going to lead into this thing, which is going to take you over here into this thing. And so God does control the heart of man. That's what he said.
That's right.
He does. And how many times have we done that? Have you done that?
Man, it's been many, many times. I thought about it too. Even our relationship came with that because when we first met, God turned our heart towards each other to be there for each other out of the blue. We had barely even known each other, and suddenly we were trying to do ministry, and I was trying to help with things and everything else this. And it was not a past relationship. We hadn't met anybody like each other.
Lord mercy.
It was God modifying or moving the heart. And if God can do the heart in that situation, he can do it in any situations. Another situation or example is once my wife and I needed, in our business, we had a client, a multimillionaire that we needed him to respond and answer something. And we needed the answer immediately. And we had sent an email to him, and he wasn't replying. And for some reason, we decided we were going to sit back and just pray. And we began to pray that the Lord would move his heart and everything else, and that he'd bring the answer. And then when we got up, we realized that during our prayer, he had responded and responded positively. And we realized that if God can move the heart of somebody, that was states and states away, and get him to respond in that exact moment, then God can control our hearts. He can control our hearts on, where we feel like we need to go. He can control our hearts in the situations, the ups and downs. Who we're with.
How many times though have we have our mind set on something? We have our mindset. We're gonna, I'm gonna go do this, and I got this to do, and I'm gonna do this, and I don't care. You got all these things you want to do, but then somewhere along the way, we say, you know what, man, I was gonna go over here, but now I changed my mind. I think I'm gonna go over here. Then what made you change your mind? You were so adamant about going over here.
That's right.
Was it that God changed your heart in the midst of you going over here? Of course he did. Of course, he knew, according to the counsel and the purpose of his will and everything else that he knew on the back end that you couldn't see, that it would have been profitable for you to go over there, end up over here at this time. That's why our timings and our seasons is ordered by God. God is in control of all that. That's why he changed your heart, because he knew if you wouldn't have went over there, that would have led to potentially trouble or some part of your life. And God had to change your heart. Even though you wanted to go there, God didn't change it. There's sometimes God will let you go there. There's sometimes he will. If it works in accordance with his purpose, counsel, and will, he'll let you go there. But if not, he will change your heart and have you go this way. And how many times have we had our heart changed? Many, many times. How many times do you want to do something, you change your mind and say, I'm going to do this?
Yep,
many
times.
Every day.
So, do you think that the heart and your desires are two different things when it comes to that?
I just think that they both tie in together. I mean, your heart, what's in your heart, your desires. Desires are in your heart. God put them there. And I believe God has considered the desires of your heart. He considered everything that was in there that he put there anyway. You know, and I still believe that the heart desires are knitted together and they still work in accordance with his purpose, will, and his counsel. You cannot, God's not going to let you deviate. You can't deviate from that because, especially if you've been called of God. If you've been called of God, you can just forget it because He is going to minister to you, and His ultimate goal is to bring you to a place in His perfect will, which we talked about last week. And some of us are living in that. Some of us still living in the planned will. Some of us are in the perfect will. I believe that the desires in your heart are knitted together. I believe they both they're wonder twins. They work together. I truly believe that. I mean, and just piggyback. What do you think about that? I mean, you brought that up. I mean, that's a very interesting point there.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up from the angle of that there are people that God may be leading to hurt and put their heart to say, hey, you need to go here.